Hey folks, thanks for checking out my 8.25 Fury Warrior guide. So if you're new to my channel, I'm going to run through the rating build, Mythic Plus build. We'll look at talents, Azurite traits, essences, stat priority, rotation. We'll cover all the basics to get you set up for 8.25 and the culmination of BFA. So where we're going to go right off the hop, we're going to look at the rating build for Fury. So if you're less familiar, Endless Rage is the way to go. It's by far the best option for 95% of the scenarios out there. Alternatively, Double Time is pretty much the standard talent for Tier 2. It really helps the raid because we don't have a ton of mobility as these big jacked up warriors. So having that extra stack of charge might help a little bit, but it's really a small DPS increase. From Tier 3, Sudden Death is the standard talent for just about every situation. It sims the best, although Furious Slash is close behind. But the challenge with Furious Slash is that in most actual situations, it it falls behind. We don't actually play a great cleave game. We really just rely on our Whirlwind for cleave. So no major change there. Stick with Sudden Death. Tier 4, I've found the Furious Charge doesn't have a major benefit, so that War Paint is really the best defensive value through the entire tier. So War Paint is basically the exclusive go-to for both rating and Mythic Plus. Tier 5, you're going to see it really quick. Carnage is the best talent on the row for almost any situation you can imagine. Um, it, it's really just a little bit of a trade-off here. If you'd only go to like Frothing Berserker if you need your Blade Storm or Dragon Roar to do more damage, and Massacre would be okay if you knew that you needed a major push between 35% down from an execution standpoint. Nothing too crazy there. Um, Tier 6 is really Dragon Roar. I think that's the standard single target and solid AoE option. Um, really Tier 6 is all about some AoE, so the question is usually Dragon Roar or Blade Storm, and it depends on what kind of interval you want your AoE on. For the most part, we're in really good shape for our rating standpoint with Dragon Roar, but we can talk about Mythic Plus, and that's where you start to get a little more likelihood of using Blade Storm from a very good sustained AoE standpoint. Finally, Tier 7, from a rating standpoint, Siegebreaker is the best option for single target. It's almost always used in rating. So it really only falls behind on AoE when there's a bunch of targets and you can no longer cleave Siegebreaker. So switch this build up a little bit. Let's go specifically for Mythic Build in case didn't follow my voice there. Tier 2. We're not going to go with double time. We're going to sacrifice that mobility for Storm Bolt because that's one of basically our very few stuns that we have. So we'll take it. Sudden Death stays, War Paint stays, Carnage stays. Now we get to have a little bit more of a serious debate. Dragon Roar was the go-to for rating. I think Blade Storm is what works for me the most. So I'd pop that in. Eventually. There we go. And finally, Siegebreaker. I don't really like that for high AoE situations. So now we've got a little bit of a choice. Reckless Abandon is a good option for cleave or AoE situations. It's a little bit behind on single target damage. Anger Management is an option for all situations. It's slightly better, or it's slightly behind where Siegebreaker is on single target, and pretty even with Reckless Abandon in a lot of cleave and AoE situations. So Anger Management allows you to have Recklessness ready a lot more often, which can make it easier to line up with important pulls in Mythic Plus. It's also a viable option for rating. So Reckless Abandon, Anger Management, those are my two go-tos. I think it would be Anger Management for me. All right, so here we are with our Mythic Plus build. Now, what do you want to do with this? One of the best Azurite specs that jumped at us as the Azurite trait screw was Cold Steel Hot Blood. It's fantastic for single target. It's got pretty solid stackable abilities as far as cleave goes, and we'll look at them a little bit here. So the real thing that you want to manage or keep an eye on is whether you want to put 2 stacks on Raging Blow as opposed to having a higher priority Bloodthirst. So Cold Steel Hot Blood does make Bloodthirst more valuable as an Azurite trait, and Pulverizing Blows give Raging Blow more value. So there's kind of a complementary piece here. So if you really want to figure out what I'm trying to recommend, it's going to be as follows. So get 1 Unbridled Ferocity and even drop eye levels to get it. It's the most important Azurite trait you need. Once you have that, go for Cold Steel Hot Blood and Reckless Fury traits. And then after you're stacking them, if you can pick up 1 Simmering Rage or Overwhelming Power, you're in great shape. Overwhelming Power is absolutely fantastic from an inner trait standpoint still. And then there's some zone-specific traits, such as Treacherous Covenant, Swirling Sands, that really stack well with Cold Steel Hot Blood. As far as Azurite traits go, Undulating Tide still stacks the highest. Cold Steel Hot Blood, Endless Hunger, Champion of Azeroth, they're all pretty competitive. Overwhelming Power is the major tier 2 differentiator from a value-added standpoint. No, not a lot of shockers here, but Condensed Light Force is the best essence that we want to go for, and by more than 20% compared to the second best trait, and the second best actually surprisingly is Crucible of Flame, which I really like. It gives me a little bit of that increased damage, and I like the mobility. When I've got little mobs trying to run away from me, it's a nice one to be able to burn them down. Gives me that range benefit that warriors sometimes struggle with when I've burnt out my charges. After actually Crucible of Flame, the third and fourth are Blood of the Enemy and Memory of Lucid Dreams, which are actually pretty close to one another. So Condensed Life Force, pick it up, push that endgame content in Natural. It'll pay for itself. From a stat racking standpoint, they're all pretty close, and they'll basically change depending on the gear that you get. So kind of similar what goes hand in hand with your Azurite traits and your stats. Take some time, learn how to sim, whether it's Ask Mr. Robot, whether it's you go on Blood Mallet, like go look at what simulations will do to your character's output. It'll make a major upgrade. For most people who have multiple Cold Steel Hot Blood, crit is one of the major ways to go. But if I were to read out to you what I thought the stat ranking was, it'd be haste, mastery being about the same as crit, and then verse being the last. So it really just depends on what it is that you're looking like. If you were hoping to do some min-maxing, then we're going to talk about races here very quickly, but it's not like there's a massive difference. On the Horde side, Zandalari Troll is actually simming really well right now, and for the Alliance, the old Fury Gnomes are topping the charts. I always like to see the Gnomes, while small, not counted out. A little bit of fun. All right, finally, we're going to talk about playstyle and rotation. Up to this point, drop in the comments. Let me know, did I get the talents right? Did I miss anything? I'm always open to your feedback. So, from a rotation, this is basically the priority list. Cast Recklessness and Siegebreaker, if you've selected it. Rampage, once Recklessness is active and you've stacked up your talent, and Rampage if Enrage is not stacked up above 90. Execute is your top priority, then Bloodthirst, Raging Blow if it's at 2 charges, and Dragon Roar or Bladestorm. If you're talented in a Bladestorm, only use it if the previous global cooldown was Rampage. Go with Raging Blow again, and finally Whirlwind. The order of Raging Blow if at 2 charges and Bloodthirst changes depending on what traits you have. So again, we'll back it up. If you want to hit this raid boss with your opener, you're going to go cast Siegebreaker, and then If you have a rampage available, you're going to swing right off the bat. If not, you're going to go bloodthirst and then set up into rampage. Continue with the normal rotation from there. Um, if you're in a multi-target situation, what you really want to do is just ensure that you're performing a whirlwind every third global cooldown, so all of the abilities naturally cleave. It really simplifies the warrior playstyle, and it's one of the reasons I suggest Fury Warrior as a starting point for a lot of different characters. It's a real complementary cleave AoE approach. So as far as playstyle improvements that characters can incorporate, there is a rage gain tied to charge, and it's sometimes worth using during your normal DPS rotations. It's it's commonly much more used under the arm spec, but it's something to be aware of if Fury is going to be your home. It depends on the boss you're fighting and how large their hitbox is. Typically, small bosses are easier to charge, like what we've seen with Jaina or any of the smaller individuals out there. If you feel like it's a long walk to get out of charge, then basically never do it. It's not worth backing yourself out of being able to create damage. So that'll look a little bit like this. There we go. Got to charge. I'm out of range because I got too close. So major interruption there to the amount of damage that you're running through. So that's just something to keep in mind as you're trying to generate a little bit of additional rage or damage, but it's really you've got to spend a little bit of time getting sharp with understanding what the hitbox looks like of that who you're up against. In terms of cooldown management, save your last recklessness for inside of the execution phase. Look at logs or judge in the game how many cooldowns you'll get in a fight and hold that cooldown when needed. Look at that. One thing to note is that Raid Trinket Ramping Amplitude Gigavolt Engine is worth pre-using before the pull and before you're following cooldown usages. Aim to have 10 to 11 seconds left on the buff when you use Recklessness. That's just because it increases haste so much. Finally, this is one of the major macros that I like to use. Set up your Recklessness macro to essentially use your trinkets while you're incorporating recklessness or berserking or charge. Set yourself up so it's kind of a single click. You're not losing a whole bunch of time or seconds clicking different buttons, but make sure that you can basically macro all of these abilities together, and it makes a significant improvement from where it is what you're trying to do, and doesn't waste any of your reckless seconds here. Alternatively, if you are looking for a macro for Heroic Leap, there's some good ones out there as well as Charge. But before you go macroing any of those abilities, make sure that you have separate key bindings for those individual abilities. So whether it's a racial like Berserking, or Blood Fury if you're an Orc, or I think Ancestral Call if you're a Mega Orc, there's some good plays out there. So make sure you've got them set up differently because they're on different cooldowns. Certainly having Siege Breaker and Recklessness together is a lot of fun though. So take some time to check that out if you so can. All right, folks, if you made it this far, then you have been pretty dedicated to seeing a little bit more of Fury. I appreciate your time and energy with it. Drop down the comments. Let me know what I can do well. Let me know what I can do better. Give me all the feedback, please. I'm trying to get better. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you soon. Later.